The moment still replays in my mind sometimes. The rage in my father's eyes as he slammed his fist on the dining room table. The cake my mother had spent hours decorating jumping slightly from the impact. The words that cut through the air like a physical force. "You're not family anymore." And then, just minutes later, the unmistakable sound of a luxury car pulling into our suburban driveway, the doorbell chiming, and my father's face draining of all color as one of the wealthiest women in America walked into our modest home, looking for me. Not for my brilliant lawyer brother, not for my charismatic younger brother. For me. The daughter who was never enough. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That's the climax of a story that took 28 years to unfold. A story about worth, validation, and what it really means to build something that matters. A story about a girl who was invisible in her own family until the day she became impossible to ignore. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Jessica Parker, and I grew up believing there was something fundamentally wrong with my ambitions. Our family legacy was built on legal brilliance. Parker and Associates had been a respected law firm in Chicago for 2 generations. My grandfather established it, my father expanded it, and my older brother Mark was destined to continue the tradition. The path was clear, expected, and according to my father, the only one worth taking. Except I didn't want it. From the time I was 12, taking apart computers and putting them back together in our basement, I knew my passion lay elsewhere. While Mark memorized legal precedents, I taught myself to code. While my younger brother Tyler charmed his way, through social circles, I designed my first rudimentary programs. My father watched my developing interests with growing disappointment, as if each line of code I wrote was a personal betrayal of everything he'd built. My mother, Sarah, was kind, but conflict-averse. She'd whisper encouragements when my father wasn't around, telling me to follow my heart, while simultaneously urging me to try to understand your father's perspective. She existed in that impossible space many women occupy, trying to support everyone without displeasing anyone, and slowly disappearing in the process. Our home in Oak Park, an affluent suburb just west of Chicago, was spacious but stifling. Every wall adorned with family photos where my brothers were centered, and I seemed to exist on the periphery. Every dinner conversation inevitably turned to law, with my father quizzing Mark on cases while Tyler chimed in with quick-witted observations that made everyone laugh. I would sit quietly, picking at my food, occasionally attempting to share something about a new programming breakthrough, only to be met with blank stares or swift redirection. "That's nice, Jessica," my father would say with practiced politeness, before turning to Mark. Now, about that Henderson case, I learned early that my voice carried less weight, that my achievements existed in a different, lesser category than my brother's. When Mark got accepted to Northwestern Law, my father took the entire extended family out to Chicago's most exclusive steakhouse. When Tyler made the varsity basketball team as a freshman, Dad bought him a custom-designed Letterman jacket. When I won the state technology competition in my senior year of high school, I got a distracted good job over breakfast. The pattern was set, immovable as stone. Mark was the golden child, following directly in my father's footsteps. Tyler was the charming one who could do no wrong, and I was excess. The daughter who refused to fit into the space allocated for her. I still remember the day I received my acceptance to the University of Illinois' computer science program, ranked among the top in the nation. I'd worked myself to exhaustion for that acceptance, maintaining a perfect GPA while completing advanced coding projects in what little free time I had. The letter arrived on a Saturday morning, and I held it with trembling hands, reading and rereading the congratulatory language, allowing myself to feel, just for a moment, the pure joy of achievement. That evening at dinner, I waited for a lull in conversation before placing the acceptance letter beside my father's plate. He glanced at it, scanned the contents, and gave a small nod. "Computer science," he said, his tone neutral but his disapproval evident. "I suppose it's good to have a backup plan. Law schools appreciate diverse backgrounds." "It's not a backup plan, Dad," I said, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. "This is what I want to do." He set down his fork and looked at me directly, perhaps the most attention he'd given me in weeks. "Jessica, you're a Parker. Parkers practice law. It's what we do. It's who we are." "But I'm good at this," I insisted, feeling that familiar tightness in my throat. "Really good. Professor Winters says I have a natural talent for—" "Natural talent doesn't compare to family obligation," he interrupted. Mark understood this. Even Tyler understands this, and he's still in high school. My brothers exchanged uncomfortable glances but said nothing. They never did. "I don't want to be a lawyer," I said, the words coming out with more force than I intended. The silence that followed was deafening. My father's expression hardened, his jaw tightening in that way that always signaled his patience was wearing thin. "We've put aside money for law school," he said finally. "Not computer games." "It's not games," I said, feeling heat rise to my face. "It's computer science, programming, creating things that actually help people." "And the law doesn't help people?" He raised an eyebrow. "How do you think our family built everything we have? How do you think we afford this house, your clothes, your education?" "Mike," my mother interjected softly, placing a hand on his arm. "Perhaps we could—" "No, Sarah," he cut her off. "Jessica needs to understand what's at stake here. This family has a legacy, a reputation. We've worked for generations to build something meaningful, and now she wants to throw it away to play with computers?" I looked down at my plate, blinking rapidly to hold back tears I refused to let him see. I'd known this would be his reaction. Yet somehow I'd still hoped for something different. A sliver of pride. A moment of seeing me, really seeing me, instead of the disappointment I represented. "Fine," I said quietly. "I'll pay for it myself." And I did. Through scholarships, part-time jobs, and student loans, I'm still paying off to this day. I put myself through college while watching my brothers receive generous checks from our parents each month. I lived in a cramped apartment with 3 roommates, while Mark enjoyed a spacious condo paid for by Parker & Associates' Future Partner Fund. I ate ramen and worked late shifts at the campus IT center while Tyler posted Instagram photos from spring break trips to Cancun. But I didn't resent the financial struggle as much as the emotional one. Money was tangible, quantifiable. The absence of my father's approval was an invisible weight, impossible to measure yet constantly present. Each family gathering became an exercise in invisibility. I would arrive, exchange pleasantries, then fade into the background as my father held court, celebrating Mark's internships or Tyler's networking prowess. "Mark just secured a position with Judge Holloway for next summer," my father would announce at Thanksgiving, raising his glass. "One of the most selective clerkships in the state." Then, turning to my younger brother with equal pride. "And Tyler here has already made connections with 3 of the top firms in Chicago as a sophomore." Someone, usually an aunt or family friend, would eventually remember my existence. "And Jessica, how are your computer classes going?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Before I could answer, my father would smoothly redirect. "Did I mention Mark's been invited to join Law Review? Youngest student in 5 years to receive the honor." College graduation came and went. I received my degree with high honors, but my father and brothers didn't attend the ceremony. There was an important case that required their presence at the firm. My mother came alone, taking photos she later showed me with sad eyes, saying, Your father wanted to be here. You know how work gets. But I did know. I knew exactly what work meant in the Parker family. It meant anything and everything related to Parker and Associates. It meant law briefs and client meetings and court appearances. It meant the firm my grandfather had started in 1952 with a single desk and a second-hand typewriter. It meant the legacy that now occupied a full floor of a downtown Chicago high-rise. It never meant me. After graduation, while my classmates accepted lucrative positions at Google, Amazon, and Facebook, I made a decision that surprised even myself. Instead of following the traditional tech path, I founded my own company. Looking back, I think part of me still wanted to prove something to my father, that I could build something meaningful on my own terms, that his defined version of success wasn't the only valid one. I called my company Streamline Solutions. Not the most creative name, but it described exactly what my software did. I'd identified a gap in the market during one of my college internships. Small to mid-sized businesses were drowning in inefficient processes, using cobbled-together systems that wasted time and resources. My software integrated inventory management, customer data, scheduling, and billing into one streamlined system, automating the tedious tasks that drained productivity. The beginning was brutal. I worked out of my apartment, subsisting on coffee and determination. I cold-called potential clients, facing rejection after rejection until my ear ached from pressing the phone against it. I attended networking events, where men twice my age patted me on the head, sometimes literally, and asked if I was handling the marketing for some unnamed male boss. But I kept coding, kept refining, kept believing in what I was building even when no one else did. My first client, a family-owned furniture store on the brink of bankruptcy, took a chance only because they couldn't afford the established software. Options. When my system helped them reduce overhead by 32% in the first quarter, they referred me to other struggling small businesses in their network. Slowly, client by client, I built a reputation for creating software that actually worked. That was intuitive rather than intimidating. That solved real problems instead of creating new ones. I hired my first employee 18 months in, a brilliant programmer named Zoe, who believed in my vision enough to take a salary well below her market value. Together, we expanded the platform, adding features tailored to specific industries, while maintaining the core simplicity that made our product accessible. 3 years passed in a blur of 18-hour workdays, instant ramen, and code. I rarely went home to Oak Park, making excuses about work demands that weren't actually excuses. The truth was, each visit left me feeling smaller, less certain, more like the awkward girl seeking validation, and less like the founder I was becoming. When I did go home, nothing had changed. My father still dominated conversations with stories about Mark's courtroom successes or Tyler's growing client list at the sales firm where he now worked. My achievements, securing new clients, refining algorithms, solving complex integration issues, might as well have been spoken in a foreign language for all the interest they generated. "Still doing your computer things?" my father would ask dismissively. "Well, I suppose it keeps you busy." I learned to stop sharing, to smile politely and deflect questions about my work, to ask about Mark's cases and Tyler's prospects, playing the supportive sister while swallowing the bitter pill of continued invisibility, until everything changed. It happened in the 4th year of Streamline's existence. We'd grown to a team of 12, moved into a real office, albeit a small one in an unfashionable part of town, and developed a solid client base of local businesses. We were stable but not thriving, respected but not renowned. Then Zoe had a breakthrough. She'd been working on an algorithm to predict inventory needs based on historical data, customer behavior, and external factors like weather patterns and local events. What she created went beyond our expectations. It didn't just predict needs, it identified patterns human analysts consistently missed, reducing waste and increasing profit margins by percentages that seemed impossible. When we implemented it, For an existing client, a regional grocery chain with 15 locations, their quarterly profits increased by 22%. They weren't just managing better, they were outperforming competitors twice their size. Word spread. Suddenly, businesses weren't just calling us, they were pursuing us aggressively. Our waiting list grew, our prices increased. Our small office began feeling very small indeed. And then came the email that changed everything. Catherine Wells, CEO of Simmons Global, wanted a presentation. Not from our sales team, we didn't have one, but from me personally. For context, Simmons Global was a Fortune 500 company with operations in 37 countries. Catherine Wells was a legend, the rare female CEO who'd built her company from nothing, a self-made billionaire known for her ruthless intelligence and unerring instinct for innovation that actually delivered results rather than just promising them. And she wanted to meet me, Jessica Parker, the girl whose own father couldn't be bothered to attend her college graduation. The presentation was scheduled, prepared for, agonized over. I rehearsed until my throat was raw, revised slides, until the words blurred together, ran through potential questions until I could answer them in my sleep. The day came. I wore my only good suit, navy blue, purchased on sale 2 years earlier, and took a lift to Simmons Global's gleaming headquarters in downtown Chicago. As the elevator climbed to the executive floor, I tried to calm my racing heart with deep breaths that did nothing to steady my shaking hands. Catherine Wells was both exactly as I'd imagined and nothing like I expected. Tall, impeccably dressed, with short silver hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to evaluate everything in microseconds. She didn't waste time on small talk. "Your predictive inventory system," she said after the briefest of introductions. "Walk me through how it works." For the next 2 hours, I did exactly that, explaining our algorithms, demonstrating the system, answering increasingly specific and technical questions from Catherine and her team of executives. I didn't simplify or apologize. I spoke their language, met their scrutiny with confidence born from knowing my product inside and out. When the presentation ended, Catherine dismissed her team with a nod. Once we were alone, she leaned back in her chair and studied me with an intensity that made me want to squirm. "You built this from nothing," she said. It wasn't a question. Yes. No Silicon Valley funding, no rich family backing you. I almost laughed at that last part. Definitely not. She nodded slowly. I can always tell who's had to fight for everything versus who's had it handed to them. The fighters build better products because they can't afford to fail. She paused. Your system would save us approximately $87 million annually across our retail divisions. I tried not to visibly react to the number, but something must have shown on my face because Catherine's expression softened slightly. We want to implement your system company-wide, she continued, and I want to discuss potential acquisition options. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, legal discussions, and due diligence. Catherine's team combed through every aspect of Streamline's operations, our code, our client contracts, our finances. We negotiated terms, valuation, transition plans. When the final offer came, a number so large it felt abstract, theoretical, I signed the papers in a state of stunned disbelief. It wasn't just the money, though. That was life-changing. It was the validation. Catherine Wells, one of the most respected business minds in the country, had looked at what I built and deemed it valuable. Not just profitable, but meaningful. Important. The day after signing the acquisition papers was my 28th birthday. After 3 years of minimal contact with my family, I called my mother. The conversation was awkward, stilted, full of pauses where resentments and missed connections lived. I'd like to have dinner, I said finally. For my birthday, with everyone. My mother's surprise was audible. Oh, that would be wonderful, Jessica. Your father will be so pleased. He was just saying the other day that he misses you." I bit back the response that rose automatically to my lips, that my father had never once called me, never once reached out during those 3 years of silence. Instead, I said simply, "Tomorrow night? Around 7? "Of course. I'll make your favorite cake, the chocolate one with raspberry filling." I hadn't eaten that cake since high school, but I didn't correct her. "Perfect. And Mom, I have some news to share." "Good news, I hope?" The anxiety in her voice was palpable. "Yes," I said. "Very good news." I didn't elaborate. Some childish part of me wanted to see their faces when I told them. Wanted to watch my father process the reality that his disappointing daughter had built something remarkable without his blessing or belief. The next evening, I parked my modest Honda Civic in the driveway of my childhood home, the sprawling, Tudor and oak park that had always felt more like a museum of expectations than a place of belonging. For a moment, I sat there, gathering courage, reminding myself that I was no longer the girl who slunk away from family dinners with shoulders curved inward from the weight of disapproval. My mother answered the door with a too bright smile and nervous eyes. "Jessica, happy birthday!" She hugged me tightly, her familiar perfume bringing an unexpected wave of nostalgia. "Everyone's here." Mark brought wine. I followed her into the dining room, where my father sat at the head of the table as always. He gave me a nod that might have been interpreted as warm if you squinted and tilted your head. Mark rose to greet me with a hug that felt genuinely affectionate. My older brother had never been deliberately cruel, just complicit in his silence. Tyler bounded over with his usual energy, lifting me in a bear hug that momentarily made me feel like perhaps some bonds remained intact beneath the years of distance. "The prodigal daughter returns," my father said, his attempt at humor falling, flat in the tension-filled room. Sit, your mother's been cooking all day." Dinner began awkwardly. My mother filled silences with questions about my apartment, my health, whether I was eating enough. My father steered conversation to safe topics: Chicago politics, a recent Bears game, weather patterns that seemed to be growing more extreme each year. My brothers contributed anecdotes from work, carefully edited to exclude anything that might highlight the disparity in how our career paths were viewed. It was all so painfully familiar. The dance of avoidance, the careful navigation around any topic that might expose the fault lines in our family dynamic. But I was no longer willing to play my assigned role. As my mother served coffee and prepared to bring out the birthday cake, I set down my napkin and cleared my throat. "I have some news," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "My company has just been acquired by Simmons Global." There was a moment of confused silence. Mark spoke first. "That's Catherine Wells's company, right? The big retail conglomerate?" I nodded. "Yes, they're implementing our software across all their divisions." "That's impressive," Mark said, sounding genuinely surprised. "Congratulations." Tyler grinned. "Way to go, sis. Always knew you were the secret genius in the family." My father said nothing, his expression unreadable. "The acquisition was finalized yesterday," I continued, looking directly at him now. "The software I've been developing, the computer, things I've been playing with, is now valued at $67 million. My mother gasped. Mark's eyebrows shot up. Tyler let out a low whistle. My father's face tightened. $67 million, he repeated flatly. "And you expect us to believe that?" The room went silent. My mother froze halfway to the kitchen. "Cake forgotten." "Excuse me?" I said, though I'd heard him perfectly. "These tech valuations," he said dismissively, waving a hand. "All smoke and mirrors, inflated numbers with no substance behind them. When the bubble bursts, and it will burst, you'll see how illusory these fortunes really are." Something in me snapped. Not dramatically, not with tears or shouting, but with a calm clarity that felt like finally seeing clearly after years. of fog. My company created an algorithm that will save Simmons Global $87 million annually, I said evenly. Catherine Wells, one of the most successful CEOs in America, personally oversaw the acquisition. This isn't a bubble or a gimmick. It's innovation that solves real problems. My father's jaw tightened. Playing with computers while your brother is arguing cases that actually matter, that set legal precedents, that help real people. My software helps thousands of small businesses stay afloat, I interrupted. It saves jobs. It prevents waste. It makes lives tangibly better. A real Parker would understand the difference between a passing trend and a legacy. He continued as if I hadn't spoken. Mark is following tradition. Even Tyler, with his sales career, understands the value of personal connection, of building relationships that last generations. But you chase digital fantasies and expect applause. I looked around the table. My mother's eyes were fixed on her lap. Mark looked uncomfortable, but remained silent. Tyler glanced between my father and me, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. I didn't come here for applause, I said quietly. I came because it's my birthday, and I wanted to share my success with my family. I thought, foolishly it seems, that you might finally be proud of what I've built. My father scoffed. Proud? Of what? That you walked away from everything this family stands for? That you rejected the path we laid out for you? That you wasted your potential on... Wasted my potential? The words came out sharper than I intended. I built a multi-million-dollar company from nothing. I created jobs. I solved problems that have plagued businesses for decades. How exactly is that wasting potential? He slammed his hand on the table then, making the dishes rattle. Enough! You come back after years of ignoring your family obligations, expecting us to celebrate your rejection of everything we value. You're just like your Aunt Celia, always thinking she knew better than everyone else. Well, look how she ended up. Aunt Celia, my father's sister who had pursued a career in international aid against family wishes, was never spoken of except as a cautionary tale. The comparison was meant to wound, and it did, but not in the way he intended. Aunt Celia spent her life helping others and died knowing she'd made a difference, I said. I'd consider that a success by any meaningful measure. My father's face reddened. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. You think success is measured by checking your own selfish boxes? Real success means honoring commitments, upholding traditions, putting family above personal whims. Dad, Mark interjected, finally finding his voice. Maybe we should... No! My father cut him off. She needs to hear this. She walks in here with her fabricated millions and her disrespect for everything we've built. Fabricated? I stood too, my birthday completely forgotten now. You think I'm lying? I think you're exaggerating to justify abandoning your responsibilities, he said coldly. I think you're trying to prove a point at the expense of this family's unity. Something in his tone, the absolute certainty, the complete dismissal of my reality, made everything suddenly, blindingly clear. This man would never see me. Not really. Not as I was. I would always be the daughter who disappointed, who failed to conform, who chose the wrong path, regardless of where that path led. I didn't abandon anything, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I built something new, something valuable, something mine. My father's next words came out in a shout that seemed to shake the chandelier above us. Enough! You walk in here after years of ignoring family obligations, expecting applause for your little computer game? You're not family anymore, not until you give up this nonsense and come work at the firm where you belong. The words hung in the air like physical things. My mother covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. Mark stared at our father in shock. Tyler looked at me with something like apology in his expression. and I felt free. As if the last cord tethering me to a lifetime of seeking validation had finally, mercifully snapped. "Thank you for making it clear," I said, gathering my purse. "I won't bother you again." As I turned to leave, my phone rang. The name on the screen made me pause. Catherine Wells. Something, perhaps that newly discovered freedom, perhaps a lingering desire for vindication, made me answer on speaker. "Jessica Parker," I said calmly. "Jessica, Catherine here. I'm in your neighborhood for a meeting and thought I'd stop by to celebrate our partnership in person. Is this a good time? My driver says we're about 2 minutes from the address in your file." I looked at my father's now confused face. "Perfect timing, Catherine. I'm at my parents' house for my birthday. Do you have the address?" "Your birthday? Even better reason to celebrate. Yes, we have it. See you in 2 minutes." I ended the call and met my father's stare. Catherine Wells is worth $2 billion. She's also my newest client and business partner, and apparently she's about to join my birthday dinner. The transformation in my father's face was immediate and dramatic. The angry flush drained away, replaced by a pallor I'd never seen before. His mouth opened and closed wordlessly, like a fish suddenly finding itself on dry land. Mark and Tyler exchanged alarmed glances while my mother hurried to straighten the already immaculate dining room. "Catherine Wells? Coming here? Now?" My father finally managed, his voice strained. "Yes," I said simply, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "Is that a problem?" Before he could answer, headlights swept across the dining room windows as a sleek black Bentley pulled into our driveway. The car's engine purred to a stop, and I watched as my father instinctively straightened his tie, smoothed his hair, and adopted the expression he reserved for important clients: pleasant, confident, and entirely false. "Jessica," he hissed, desperation replacing anger. "You should have given us warning. The house isn't prepared for someone of Ms. Wells' stature." I gave him a level look. 2 minutes ago, you said I wasn't family anymore. Now you're worried about impressing my business partner?" The doorbell rang before he could respond. My mother hurried to answer it, nervously patting her hair. I followed, not wanting to miss the moment. Catherine Wells stood on our doorstep, somehow managing to make our home look smaller by her mere presence. She wasn't physically imposing, slim, perhaps 5'7", but she carried herself with the easy confidence of someone who had never doubted her right to occupy any space she entered. Her silver hair was styled in an elegant bob, her charcoal gray suit was undoubtedly bespoke, and the single strand of pearls at her throat probably cost more than my first car. "Jessica!" she exclaimed, her smile genuine as she spotted me behind. My mother. "Happy birthday, my dear." She extended a small, beautifully wrapped package toward me. A little something to celebrate both occasions. My mother finally found her voice. "Please come in, Ms. Wells. We're so honored to have you. Join us." Catherine stepped into our foyer, her assessing gaze taking in everything in seconds. "You must be Jessica's mother. The resemblance is striking. You both have those remarkable eyes." She extended her hand. "Catherine Wells, thank you for allowing me to intrude on your family celebration." My mother shook her hand, clearly flustered. "Sarah Parker. And it's no intrusion at all. We're delighted." I led Catherine into the dining room where my father and brothers had risen to their feet. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut, but Catherine seemed either oblivious to it, or more likely, accustomed to walking into rooms where her presence altered the atmospheric pressure. "Mr. Parker," she said, extending her hand to my father. "I've heard so much about you." My father took her hand, his lawyer's mask firmly in place. "Ms. Wells, the pleasure is entirely mine. Your reputation precedes you." "As does yours," she replied coolly, and something in her tone made me wonder exactly what she'd heard about Michael Parker of Parker and Associates. "And these must be Jessica's brothers," she continued, turning to Mark and Tyler. "The lawyer and the salesman, correct?" They nodded, clearly surprised that she knew of them. "Jessica speaks of her family often," Catherine said, though this was entirely untrue. I had mentioned them exactly once in passing, during contract negotiations. "I feel I know you all already." My mother hovered anxiously. "Can I offer you coffee, Ms. Wells?" And we were about to serve birthday cake. "Coffee would be lovely, and I never turn down cake," Catherine said warmly, "especially for such a special celebration." My father gestured toward the chair at his right, the position of honor at our table. "Please sit, Ms. Wells. We're so glad you could join us. Jessica was just telling us about your business arrangement." Catherine took the offered seat but turned slightly to face me. "Business arrangement? Is that what your father calls it?" She laughed, a rich, genuine sound. "Jessica is being modest as usual. What she's created is nothing short of revolutionary. Our tech team spent 6 months trying to develop something similar before we realized it would be more efficient to simply acquire her company outright." She turned back to my father. "You must be incredibly proud." The word proud hung in the air, charged with all that had transpired moments before her arrival. My father's expression remained pleasant, but I could see the muscle twitching in his jaw, a tell he'd had since I was a child, appearing whenever he was under pressure in a courtroom. "Of course," he said smoothly. "Jessica has always been independent." Catherine raised an eyebrow. "Independent is one word for it. Brilliant is the one I prefer. Do you know how rare it is to find someone who can translate complex problems into elegant solutions? I've worked with tech teams from MIT, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, and Jessica's approach outperforms them all. It's why we not only acquired her company, but insisted she join our executive team." My mother returned with coffee and Catherine's. Revelation caused her hand to tremble slightly as she set down the cup. "Executive team?" she echoed. "Yes," Catherine confirmed, thanking my mother for the coffee. "Chief Innovation Officer, reporting directly to me. The board approved the position yesterday, along with the compensation package." She looked at me. "Which I assume you haven't had time to mention yet?" I shook my head, still processing the title myself. We had discussed a senior role, but not this level of seniority. "Well then," Catherine continued, clearly enjoying herself, "allow me the pleasure of sharing that Jessica will be overseeing our entire digital transformation initiative. The starting salary is $875,000 annually, plus stock options currently, valued at approximately $12 million, vesting over 5 years. She took a sip of coffee, seemingly oblivious to the shocked silence around the table. "The benefits package is quite comprehensive as well. Healthcare, of course, plus the use of the company jet when necessary, relocation assistance to our headquarters building, and the standard executive profit-sharing program." I watched my father's face as Catherine casually outlined a compensation package that dwarfed his own partner's draw at the law firm. His expression remained frozen in a polite smile, but his complexion had taken on an almost greenish tinge. "That's substantial," Mark said finally, breaking the silence. "It's market rate for talent of Jessica's caliber," Catherine replied matter-of-factly. "If anything, we're getting a bargain. The projected 5-year return on her predictive inventory system alone justifies triple that amount." She turned to me with a genuine smile. "But Jessica drives a hard bargain. She insisted that a portion of the acquisition funds be distributed among her team members." This was true. Zoe and the others had been with me from nearly the beginning, working for below-market wages because they believed in what we were building. They deserved to share in the success. "That sounds like Jessica," my mother said softly, and the pride in her voice made my throat tighten unexpectedly. My father cleared his throat. Well, this is certainly unexpected news. We had no idea Jessica's work had attracted such significant attention. The implication was clear. If he had known, perhaps he wouldn't have dismissed it so thoroughly just minutes earlier. Catherine gave him a look that made me suspect she knew exactly what had transpired before her arrival. Really? I find that surprising. Jessica's innovations have been covered in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and the Financial Times over the past year. Her predictive algorithm was the subject of a feature in Harvard Business Review just last month. She tilted her head. But perhaps corporate technology isn't an area you follow closely. My father, who prided himself on being well-informed about all aspects of business and finance, who read those exact publications religiously, looked as though he'd been slapped. I've been focused on a complex litigation matter, he said stiffly. Of course, Catherine nodded sympathetically. We all have our specialties. Jessica's happens to be revolutionizing how businesses operate in the digital age. She turned to my mother. Now, I believe you mentioned birthday cake? My mother jumped up, grateful for something concrete to do. Yes, I'll bring it right out. As she hurried to the kitchen, Catherine opened her handbag and withdrew an envelope, placing it on the table before me. The formal offer letter, by the way. The board finalized it this afternoon. I thought you might want to review it before Monday. I took the envelope, still processing everything that was happening. Thank you. I'll look it over tonight. Take your time, she said easily. Though I should warn you, 3 of our competitors have been inquiring rather persistently about whether you might be available. The acquisition news will break on Monday, and I expect your phone will start ringing off the hook. Tyler leaned forward, curiosity overcoming his discomfort. Competitors like who? Oracle, for one, Catherine replied. Microsoft has expressed interest, and a certain social media giant that shall remain nameless has been particularly aggressive. She smiled at me. But I trust we've made the most compelling offer, both financially and in terms of the impact Jessica can have with us. My mother returned with the cake, chocolate with raspberry filling, exactly as she'd promised, complete with lit candles. Make a wish, Jessica, she said, placing it before me. I looked around the table, at my mother's nervous pride, my brother's stunned expressions, my father's barely concealed discomfort, and Catherine's knowing smile, and realized I didn't need to wish for anything. For the first time in my life, I didn't need external validation. I had built something valuable on my own terms and created a future that was entirely mine. I blew out the candles. What did you wish for? Tyler asked automatically. If she tells you, it won't come true, my mother said, falling back on the familiar superstition. Catherine laughed. In my experience, the most powerful wishes are the ones we make come true ourselves. She looked directly at me. And Jessica has already proven she can do exactly that. As my mother served cake, the conversation shifted. Catherine asked questions about the neighborhood, about Chicago, about my brother's careers, all with what appeared to be genuine interest. She was charming, engaged, and completely in control of the room. I watched as my father attempted to regain his footing, to insert himself into the conversation as the patriarch and authority figure he had always been in our home. Parker & Associates has been a fixture in Chicago's legal community for 2 generations, he said, steering the conversation to familiar territory. We've represented some of the city's most prominent businesses and families. Is that so? Catherine replied politely. Jessica mentioned you specialize in corporate law. Among other areas, my father said. We have a diverse practice, but yes, corporate law is our primary focus. In fact, we've represented several Fortune 500 companies over the years. He named a few, carefully selecting the most impressive clients from the firm's history. Catherine nodded. Impressive. though I don't believe Simmons Global has ever engaged your services. No, my father admitted. But we would certainly welcome the opportunity to discuss how we might be of assistance. Our firm has extensive experience in... We maintain an in-house legal team of 47 attorneys, Catherine interrupted smoothly, all specializing in different aspects of corporate, international, and intellectual property law. But I appreciate the offer. She turned back to me. Speaking of which, Jessica, I meant to mention that Graham in legal was particularly impressed with the licensing structure you developed. He said it was one of the most forward-thinking approaches he's seen, from a tech founder. I smiled, remembering the hours spent researching and drafting those licensing agreements. I wanted something that protected our intellectual property while still allowing clients the flexibility they needed. Well, it paid off. The legal team barely had to modify anything during the acquisition process, which, believe me, is unprecedented. My father's expression tightened at this casual dismissal of his business overture, coupled with praise for my legal work, an area where he had always insisted I had no aptitude or interest. The remainder of the evening continued in this vein, Catherine effortlessly controlling the conversation, praising my work in specific technical terms that made it clear she truly understood what I had built, while my father attempted increasingly desperate pivots to topics where he could reassert his authority. Through it all, I remained mostly quiet, observing this shift in dynamics with a sense of detachment. The validation from Catherine, while gratifying, wasn't what mattered most to me now. What mattered was the realization that I had finally broken free of the need for my father's approval. I had defined success on my own terms and achieved it without his support or blessing. As the evening wound down, Catherine checked her watch and sighed. I'm afraid I need to head back downtown. I have an early conference call with our Tokyo office. She turned to my mother. Thank you for your hospitality, Mrs. Parker. The cake was delicious. My mother blushed with pleasure. Please call me Sarah, and you're welcome anytime. Catherine rose, and everyone else stood as well. Jessica, shall we talk tomorrow about the transition timeline? I know it's the weekend, but we'd like to announce your appointment alongside the acquisition news on Monday morning. Of course, I agreed. I'm available whenever works for you. Excellent. She extended her hand to my father. Mr. Parker, thank you for the engaging conversation. You've raised an extraordinary daughter. My father took her hand, his lawyer's mask firmly in place despite the evening's humiliations. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Wells. It was illuminating. Catherine's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Indeed. She turned to my brothers, exchanging brief goodbyes, then looked at me. Walk me out? I nodded and followed her to the door. On the porch, out of earshot of my family, Catherine's professional demeanor softened slightly. I hope I didn't overstep, she said quietly. When I arrived, I sensed tension. I hesitated, then decided on honesty. You arrived at a pivotal moment. My father had just informed me I was no longer part of the family. Catherine's eyebrows rose. I see. That explains a few things. She paused. You know, when I was starting out, my father told me I was embarrassing the family by playing businesswoman instead of finding a suitable husband. He didn't speak to me for 5 years. She smiled wryly, until the day his country club friends started asking how he'd inspired his daughter to build such a successful company. Did you forgive him? I asked. Eventually, but on my terms, not his. She placed a hand lightly on my arm. Just remember, Jessica, family is important, but it's not the only measure of your worth. What you've built matters. The people whose lives are improved by your work matter. Your own satisfaction matters. I nodded, unexpectedly moved by her candor. I'll see you tomorrow, she said, resuming her professional tone. 10 o'clock at my office? I'll be there. Catherine descended the steps to where her driver waited beside the Bentley. As she was about to get in, she paused and looked back at me. Happy birthday, Jessica. I think this is going to be your best year yet. I watched the car pull away, then took a deep breath before returning inside to face my family. The tableau that greeted me in the dining room was almost comical. My mother was frantically clearing plates, her nervous energy finding outlet in domestic activity. Mark sat stunned, staring at nothing. Tyler was on his phone, undoubtedly searching for news articles about me that he'd previously never bothered to read, and my father stood by the window, his back to the room, shoulders rigid with tension. "Well," my mother said brightly, too loudly, "that was certainly unexpected. Catherine seems lovely, so accomplished." "She is," I agreed simply. My father turned from the window. His expression had shifted from shock to something more calculated. I recognized it from childhood. It was the look he wore when formulating a new strategy after an unexpected setback in court. "Jessica," he said, his voice carefully modulated, "I think we need to discuss what this means for your future and for the family." Ah, there it was, the pivot, the attempt to reframe the narrative, to find a way to incorporate my success into his worldview without acknowledging his mistake. "What exactly needs discussing?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Well, your new position, for one thing. Chief Innovation Officer. That's significant. And the compensation package is substantial." He cleared his throat. "This could have important implications for your long-term financial planning. Our family office could help you manage these assets properly." I almost laughed. 20 minutes earlier, he had disowned me. Now he wanted to manage my money. "I have financial advisors, but thank you. Our family has relationships with the best wealth management firms in Chicago," he pressed. "Connections that could be valuable to you as you navigate this new chapter." I studied him, seeing clearly for the first time the man beneath the father. Ambitious, strategic, and unwilling to relinquish control even when proven wrong. "It's interesting," I said finally, "how quickly I've gone from being not family anymore to having access to our family resources." Mark winced. Tyler suddenly became very interested in a loose thread on his sleeve. My mother froze in the act of wrapping leftover cake. My father's jaw tightened. "You know I didn't mean that," it was said in the heat of the moment. "No," I countered quietly. "You meant it. You just didn't expect there to be consequences." "Jessica," he began, but I held up a hand. "It's okay, Dad. Really. You've made your position clear for years. Tonight was just the first time you said it out loud." "That's not fair," he protested. "I've always supported you." "When?" I interrupted. "When did you support me? When I wanted to study computer science instead of law? When I started my company instead of joining the firm? When I achieved success by every objective measure and you still dismissed it as playing with computers?" I shook my head. "You've never supported me. You've tolerated me, at best, and only when I wasn't inconveniencing your vision of what this family should be." Mark shifted uncomfortably. "Jess, maybe now isn't the best time." "Actually, Mark, now is exactly the right time," I said, turning to include both my brothers in the conversation. "We've spent years pretending everything is fine, that the way Dad treats me versus how he treats you two is normal or acceptable. It's not, and I'm done pretending." My mother stepped forward. "Jessica, your father loves you. We all do. He just has trouble expressing it sometimes." I softened my tone as I looked at her. "I know you love me, Mom, but love without respect isn't enough. And Dad has never respected me or my choices." My father's face had reddened again. "That's not true. I wanted what was best for you." "No," I cut him off. "You wanted what was best for your image of the Parker family. There's a difference." I picked up the envelope containing Catherine's offer letter. "I should go. It's getting late, and I have a lot to review before tomorrow." "Jessica, wait," my father said, a note of desperation creeping into his voice. "We need to talk about this as a family. There are implications for all of us in this new situation." I paused at the doorway. What implications exactly? Well, for one thing, your connection to Simmons Global could be beneficial for the firm. We could offer preferential rates for legal services, given the family connection. And there it was, the real concern. Not my well-being, not pride in my accomplishments, but how he could leverage my success for his own benefit. "I'll be happy to introduce you to our legal team," I said coolly. "They can evaluate whether Parker and Associates would be a good fit for any overflow work." I let that sink in for a moment. But to be clear, any business relationship would be based on merit, not family connection, especially since, as you so recently pointed out, I'm not family anymore. The silence that followed was profound. My father stood speechless, perhaps for the first time in his life. "Goodbye, Mom," I said, giving her a quick hug. "Thank you for the cake." I nodded to my brothers. "Mark, Tyler." I walked out without looking back, got into my car, and drove away from my childhood home. As the streets of Oak Park gave way to the highway leading back to my apartment in the city, I felt a strange lightness settling over me. For years, I had carried the weight of my father's disapproval, his dismissal of my choices, his refusal to see me as I truly was. Tonight, finally, I had set that burden down. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "That was intense. For what it's worth, I think what you've done is amazing. Coffee soon?" It was a small olive branch, and I appreciated it, even as I recognized it for what it was. The beginning of a recalibration in how my family would relate to me now that my success was undeniable and publicly validated. I didn't respond immediately. I needed time to process everything that had happened, to decide what kind of relationship I wanted with my family moving forward. The automatic answer, to forgive, to pretend tonight hadn't happened, to slide back into old patterns for the sake of harmony, was tempting in its familiarity. But I knew now that I deserved better, that maintaining my dignity and self-respect was more important than maintaining the illusion of family unity. As I parked outside my apartment building, I remembered Catherine's words on the porch. "Family is important, but it's not the only measure of your worth." For so long, I had allowed my father's assessment to define me as inadequate, disappointing, less than. Tonight had crystallized something I had been slowly learning over the past few years, that his assessment had always been more about him than about me. Inside my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and settled onto the couch with the envelope Catherine had given me. As I read through the details of my new position, the responsibilities, the compensation, the resources I would have at my disposal, I felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with proving my father wrong, and everything to do with recognizing my own capabilities. I had built something valuable. I had solved problems that mattered. I had created opportunities not just for myself, but for Zoe and the rest of my team. And I had done it all without the safety net of family support or connections. My phone buzzed again, a text from my mother. "I'm so proud of you, Jessica. Always have been. Let's have lunch next week. Just us?" This, at least, felt genuine, untainted by the complex dynamics that had played out at dinner. I texted back, "I'd like that. Wednesday?" Her response came quickly. "Perfect. Love you." I set the phone down and looked around my modest apartment, the space where I had built my company from nothing, where I had worked until my eyes burned and my fingers cramped, where I had experienced both crushing doubt and soaring validation. Soon I would be moving to a new place, stepping into a new role, embracing new challenges. But the core of who I was, the determination, the vision, the refusal to settle for less than I was capable of, that would remain unchanged. My father's words, "You're not family anymore," had been meant as the ultimate rejection. Instead, they had become the final push I needed to fully embrace my independence. To recognize that while being cut off from his approval had once seemed like the worst possible punishment, it was actually the doorway to my liberation. I didn't need to be a Parker in the way he defined it. I could define myself on my own terms, and if that meant creating a different kind of family, one built on mutual respect, genuine support, and shared values, then that's what I would do. The sky outside my window had darkened to deep indigo. 28 years old, I thought. Not where I had expected to be at this age, neither the dutiful daughter my father had wanted, nor the struggling entrepreneur I had sometimes feared becoming. Instead, I was something entirely different. A woman who had found her own path and walked it with confidence, regardless of who approved. I opened my laptop and began typing an email to Zoe and the team, sharing the news about the acquisition and what it meant for all of us. There was work to be done, transitions to plan, a future to build. My birthday celebration hadn't gone as expected, but perhaps it had gone exactly as needed. As for my father, that chapter wasn't fully closed. Family relationships rarely are, but it had undeniably entered a new phase. What happened next would depend on his ability to see me as I actually was, not as he wished me to be. And while I hoped he would eventually come to that recognition, I no longer needed it to validate my worth. Catherine was right. This was going to be my best year yet. Not because of the money or the title, but because I had finally stepped fully into myself, uncompromised, unapologetic, and unafraid. The Monday morning press release about Simmons Global's acquisition of Streamline Solutions hit the business world like a controlled explosion. My phone began ringing at 6:17 a.m. and didn't stop. Former classmates who had dismissed my little project suddenly remembered our deep friendship. LinkedIn connections multiplied exponentially. 3 tech blogs requested interviews before I'd finished my first cup of coffee. I sat in my apartment, watching the notifications flood in while feeling strangely detached from it all. The external validation, while gratifying in its way, felt hollow compared to the internal clarity I'd gained at that birthday dinner. Success wasn't measured in headlines or acquisition amounts, but in the quiet certainty that I had built something meaningful on my own terms. At 8:45, I arrived at Simmons Global headquarters for my first official day as Chief Innovation Officer. The security guard checked my temporary ID and directed me to the executive elevator bank, a glass-enclosed column that shot directly to the top 5 floors of the building. As the doors closed, I caught my reflection in the polished metal interior. Same person, different context. The Jessica who had crashed on a futon while coding through the night was now Jessica Parker, C-suite executive at one of America's largest companies. The elevator opened directly into a reception area where a poised woman in her 50s greeted me by name before I could introduce myself. "Ms. Parker, welcome to Simmons Global. I'm Eleanor, your executive assistant." She extended a perfectly manicured hand. "Catherine asked me to get you settled in your office before the 9:30 executive team meeting." I followed Eleanor down a corridor of glass-walled offices, each occupied by people whose annual bonuses probably exceeded Streamline's entire initial operating budget. Several of them looked up as we passed, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and assessment. The tech world might celebrate disruptors, but traditional corporate culture approached change with warranted suspicion. I was both, the disruptive element Catherine had deliberately introduced into her executive team. "Here we are," Eleanor said, stopping before a corner office with views of both the Chicago River and Lake Michigan beyond. "Catherine thought you'd appreciate the natural light." The office was minimalist, but luxurious. A desk of polished walnut, ergonomic chair in butter-soft leather, seating area with low-slung modern furniture, and walls ready for personalization. A small conference table occupied one corner with a state-of-the-art display screen mounted on the adjacent wall. "Your team is 2 floors down," Eleanor continued, "but Catherine wanted you on the executive level. The previous CIO preferred to sit with his department, but..." She hesitated delicately. "But he's no longer here," I finished for her. The acquisition announcement had mentioned that Raymond Chen, Simmons Global's previous chief information officer, would be pursuing other opportunities. Corporate speak for an unceremonious departure. Eleanor's expression remained neutral, but I caught a flicker of something, approval perhaps, in her eyes. "Indeed. Your login credentials are on your desk, along with the executive handbook and your new devices. It has already transferred your existing email to our system and set up all necessary accounts." She checked her watch. "You have approximately 40 minutes before the executive meeting. Would you like coffee brought in?" I nodded, somewhat overwhelmed by the efficiency. "Coffee would be great, thank you." "How do you take it?" "Black, no sugar." One corner of Eleanor's mouth lifted slightly. "I thought so. I'll have it right in." She moved toward the door, then paused. "And, Ms. Parker, congratulations on the acquisition. Your predictive inventory system is impressive." Before I could respond, she had disappeared, closing the door silently behind her. I stood alone in my new domain, uncertain whether to sit at the desk or the conference table, whether to unpack the small box of personal items I'd brought, or wait until after the executive meeting. Corporate rituals were foreign territory after years of startup informality. I opted to familiarize myself with the new devices: a laptop so thin it barely qualified as three-dimensional, a tablet with custom Simmons Global apps preloaded, and a smartphone with my existing number already transferred. Eleanor reappeared with coffee in an actual porcelain cup, not a paper or plastic vessel in sight, set it on a coaster on my desk, and discreetly withdrew again. At precisely 9:25, my desk phone rang. Eleanor's voice came through with perfect clarity. "Catherine would like you to join her before the meeting. Her office is at the end of the hall on the right." I thanked her, straightened my blazer, purchased hastily over the weekend when I realized my startup wardrobe consisted primarily of jeans and hoodies, and made my way down the corridor. Catherine's office was immediately identifiable. Not only was it the largest, but it was the only one with frosted glass walls that prevented casual observation from passers-by. I knocked on the door frame, and Catherine looked up from her desk, her expression warming. "Jessica, come in, come in. Close the door behind you." Her office was unexpectedly personal. Photographs of what appeared to be family members, art that looked collected rather than corporately curated, books that showed evidence of actual reading rather than decorative arrangement. Catherine herself seemed more relaxed here, in her natural habitat, than she had at my parents' house. "How are you settling in?" she asked, gesturing to a chair opposite her desk. "It's different," I admitted. "I'm used to working in spaces where the furniture is held together with hope and duct tape." Catherine laughed, that same genuine sound I'd heard at the birthday dinner. "Well, the furniture is better here, but the politics are more complicated, which is actually what I wanted to discuss before we join the others." She leaned forward, slightly. "Not everyone on the executive team is thrilled about your appointment." I nodded. This wasn't surprising. Raymond Chen's allies? Some of them, yes. But it's more than that. You're young, female, and coming in through an acquisition rather than traditional corporate advancement. That's a triple threat to the old guard. She shrugged. Add to that the fact that I've positioned you at the same level as executives with 20-plus years of experience and, well, I'll be navigating some resentment, I finished. To put it mildly. She smiled, but her eyes held concern. I brought you in because your perspective is exactly what Simmons Global needs right now. We've grown too comfortable, too rigid in our thinking. But change is always painful for those who've mastered the old system. I understood what she wasn't explicitly saying. I was her agent of disruption, and that made me a target. How should I approach this meeting? Observe more than you speak, at least today. Get a feel for the dynamics. Thomas Lieberman, our CFO, will be your biggest skeptic. He argued against the acquisition price, claiming we could have built similar technology in-house for less. She rolled her eyes slightly, as if throwing more money at our existing IT team would magically produce innovation. And the others? Andrea Martinez, our COO, is pragmatic. She'll reserve judgment until she sees results. Chris Bennett, marketing, will be outwardly friendly but internally concerned about how your digital initiatives might affect his traditional marketing fiefdom. Janet Joe, our general counsel, is brilliant and by the book. She'll neither help nor hinder you unless legal issues are involved. Catherine paused. Actually, there is someone you should connect with. David Winters, our chief strategy officer. He advocated strongly for your acquisition. He sees the big picture in a way most of the others don't. I absorbed this information, mentally mapping the alliances and potential friction points. It wasn't so different from navigating investor relationships in the startup world, just with higher stakes and more established power structures. Any advice on handling Lieberman specifically? Catherine considered this. Thomas respects data above all else. He's dismissive of soft factors like user experience or innovation for its own sake. Everything must tie back to ROI for him. She checked her watch. We should head to the conference room, but Jessica, remember why I brought you in. Don't try to conform to their expectations. That's not what I'm paying you for. We walked together to a sleek conference room where 8 people were already seated around an oval table of polished mahogany. Conversations ceased as we entered, all eyes turning to assess me, the unknown quantity Catherine had introduced into their carefully balanced ecosystem. Good morning, everyone, Catherine said briskly, taking her seat at the head of the table. I'd like to introduce Jessica Parker, our new Chief Innovation Officer, joining us as part of the Streamline Solutions acquisition that was announced this morning. I took the empty seat to Catherine's right, aware of the subtle power dynamic. This placement established. Directly across from me sat a man in his late 50s with steel gray hair and a bespoke suit that screamed old money. Thomas Lieberman, I presumed, given the barely concealed skepticism in his expression. Jessica, Catherine continued, why don't you take a few minutes to introduce yourself to the team? I kept my introduction concise and substantive. My educational background, the genesis of Streamline Solutions, the core technology we'd developed, and my vision for implementing it across Simmons Global's operations. I emphasized concrete metrics, efficiency, improvements, cost reductions, revenue increases our existing clients had experienced, while acknowledging the challenges of scaling to an organization of Simmons Global's complexity. Throughout, I observed the reactions around the table. Andrea Martinez, a woman in her 40s with a practical bob and sharp eyes, took notes continuously. Chris Bennett, youthful despite his gray-streaked hair, with the polished charm of a career marketing executive, maintained an interested expression that never quite reached his eyes. Janet Joe, elegant, reserved, watchful, assessed me with the careful neutrality of someone accustomed to identifying potential legal liabilities before they materialized. And then there was Thomas Lieberman, whose expression moved from skepticism to outright disbelief as I outlined the projected savings our system could generate across Simmons Global's supply chain. 42% reduction in inventory costs while maintaining the same fulfillment rates? He interrupted. That's simply not possible. Our supply chain consultants from McKinsey identified a maximum theoretical improvement of 23%, and that was with significant capital investment in new distribution centers. I met his gaze steadily. McKinsey's analysis was based on traditional inventory management approaches, essentially doing the same things more efficiently. Our system fundamentally changes the equation by predicting demand patterns with greater accuracy, reducing the need for safety stock while simultaneously improving fulfillment rates. Based on what data? He challenged. Our consumer markets have complex seasonality factors that can't be captured by simplistic predictive models. Our algorithm integrates over 300 variables, including weather patterns, social media sentiment analysis, competitive promotional activity, and macroeconomic indicators, I replied. We've demonstrated its effectiveness across 7 different industry verticals, including retail environments with seasonality patterns more complex than Simmons Global's. Lieberman opened his mouth to object further, but Catherine intervened smoothly. Thomas, Jessica's team has prepared a comprehensive analysis, specifically using Simmons Global's historical data. I've scheduled a dedicated session for you two tomorrow morning to review the methodology and projections in detail. She turned to the broader group. Let's move on to the integration timeline and departmental touchpoints. The remainder of the meeting proceeded more diplomatically, with each executive outlining how their departments would interface with my team during the integration phase. David Winters, a thoughtful man in his early 50s who had remained silent during my exchange with Lieberman, offered several insightful suggestions about sequencing the rollout to maximize organizational adoption. When the meeting concluded, Lieberman departed immediately, while the others lingered to exchange pleasantries and tentative welcomes. David Winters approached me last, waiting until the others had drifted away. That was quite an introduction, he said with a slight smile. Thomas doesn't usually have his assumptions challenged so directly. I wasn't trying to challenge him, I replied. Just clarifying what our technology actually does, which challenged his assumptions. Winter's smile widened. Don't worry about it. Thomas is brilliant with numbers but resistant to paradigm shifts. He'll come around once he sees the data. He paused. Catherine mentioned you might be looking for allies in navigating our somewhat Byzantine culture. I'd be happy to provide some institutional context over lunch this week, if you're interested. I accepted gratefully, recognizing both the generous offer and the potential strategic value of having the chief strategy officer in my corner. As I returned to my office, Eleanor appeared with a schedule for the day, a sequence of integration, meetings, HR orientations, and a late afternoon session with the team that would be reporting to me. The day passed in a blur of new faces, processes, and information. By 5 o'clock, when I finally met with my direct reports, a mix of existing Simmons Global employees and the core Streamline team who had joined me in the acquisition, my head was swimming with corporate acronyms and procedural details. Zoe, my first hire and most trusted lieutenant, lingered after the others had departed. So, she said, perching on the edge of my desk, how's life in the executive stratosphere? I laughed, relieved to drop the formal demeanor I'd maintained. All day. Surreal. I keep waiting for someone to realize I don't belong here and escort me from the building. Imposter syndrome already? That didn't take long. She glanced around the luxurious office. Though I admit, this is a far cry from our first headquarters in your living room. Remember when we had to take turns using the single decent chair? And the coffee maker that only worked if you hit it in exactly the right spot? I smiled at the memory. How's the team settling in? Zoe's expression grew more serious. Mixed reactions. Most are excited about the resources we'll have access to, but there's concern about bureaucracy stifling our ability to innovate quickly. And some of the Simmons tech staff seem, well, less than thrilled about our arrival. Threatened, you mean? Exactly. Especially after word got out about Chen's departure. They're wondering who else might be considered redundant. I sighed. I need to address that directly. Schedule a full department meeting for later this week, will you? I want to outline my vision and reassure people that this isn't about replacing them, but elevating what we can accomplish together. Zoe nodded. Will do. And Jessica? For what it's worth, I think Catherine made the right choice. You belong in this office far more than most of the corporate lifers I met today. After she Left, I stood at the window watching the sun set over Chicago, the city lights beginning to glimmer against the darkening sky. My new office offered a view I could never have afforded on my own, a physical manifestation of the distance I'd traveled from my days as a struggling founder. Yet success felt different than I'd imagined during those lean years. Less like a destination reached and more like a new terrain to navigate, with its own challenges and pitfalls. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "How was your first day? Still on for lunch Wednesday?" I texted back. Intense, but good. Yes, for Wednesday. Looking forward to it. A moment later, another message appeared. This one from my father. "Congratulations on the official announcement. Very impressive. Dinner this weekend to discuss? Your choice of restaurant." I stared at the message, noting what it didn't contain. No apology for his words at the birthday dinner. No acknowledgement of his dismissal of my work until external validation forced his hand. Just the assumption that now, with my success publicly confirmed, we would naturally resume normal relations. I set the phone down without responding, not yet ready to navigate that particular emotional terrain. For years, I had craved his approval, his recognition. Now that it was being offered, conditional as it was on my externally validated success, I found I no longer needed it with the same desperate intensity. Eleanor knocked gently on my doorframe. "Ms. Parker, I'm heading out. For the evening. Is there anything else you need before I go?" I shook my head. "No, thank you. And please, call me Jessica." A hint of a smile touched her lips. "Of course. Good night, Jessica." Alone again, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, reviewing. The integration timeline Catherine had approved. The real work would begin tomorrow, convincing a corporate behemoth to embrace change, merging Streamline's innovative approach with Simmons Global's established processes, proving that Catherine's faith in me was justified. My phone buzzed again, Tyler this time. "Saw the press release. Dad's telling everyone he mentored you. Mark and I are getting drinks Friday if you want to join. No pressure." I smiled despite myself. Perhaps there was hope for rebuilding. At least some family connections on more honest terms. The next morning, I arrived at 7:30, determined to prepare thoroughly for my 9 o'clock meeting with Lieberman. Eleanor appeared at 8 with coffee and a protein bar, explaining that she'd noticed I hadn't ordered breakfast, and the executive dining room didn't open until 11. "Thomas always comes armed with spreadsheets," she advised, setting down the coffee. "He'll have had his team working overnight to find flaws in your projections." I thanked her for the insight, wondering how she knew about my meeting with Lieberman. Reading my expression, she smiled slightly. "Executive assistants know everything, Jessica. The sooner you understand that, the easier your transition will be." Duly noted. "Any other advice for handling Thomas?" Eleanor paused, weighing her words carefully. "He respects people who stand their ground, but only if they're standing on solid data. And he has a particular dislike for what he calls tech, evangelists who promise revolution without concrete metrics." She straightened a already perfect stack of papers on my desk. "He's been with Simmons for 22 years. He helped guide the company through the 2008 financial crisis without layoffs, when competitors were shedding thousands of jobs. That earned him significant influence with the board." I absorbed this, recognizing the subtext. Lieberman wasn't just a skeptical CFO. He was a power center within Simmons Global with the ability to make my integration significantly more difficult if he chose. "Thank you, Eleanor. That's helpful context." At 9 sharp, Lieberman appeared at my door without knocking, a junior analyst trailing behind him carrying a laptop and several binders. "Parker?" he said by way of greeting. "Let's see these miraculous projections of yours." The next 2 hours were the most rigorous defense of my technical methodology I'd ever experienced. Lieberman questioned every assumption, challenged every data point, and demanded explanations for even minor calculation details. His analyst, a sharp young woman named Priya who seemed both intimidated by her boss and quietly impressed by our system, took copious notes and occasionally whispered corrections or clarifications in Lieberman's ear. I matched his intensity, walking through our algorithms architecture, the machine learning models we'd developed, and the validation testing we'd conducted with existing clients. I didn't oversimplify or retreat from technical complexity. If anything, I leaned into the details, recognizing that Lieberman's skepticism came from a place of genuine analytical rigor rather than mere territorial defensiveness. Gradually, the interrogation evolved into a more collaborative discussion. By hour 3, we were exploring implementation scenarios, with Lieberman suggesting specific divisions where our system might deliver the most immediate impact. Consumer electronics has the highest inventory carrying costs relative to margin, he noted, pointing to a breakdown of Simmons Global's business units. If your system can deliver even half the improvements you're projecting, the ROI would be significant within the first 2 quarters. I'd actually recommend starting with the home goods division, I countered. The product lifecycle is less volatile than electronics, which would give us a cleaner baseline for measuring impact. Once we've validated the approach there, we can tackle electronics with those learnings incorporated. Lieberman considered this, then nodded slowly. A more conservative approach than I expected from you, but sensible. He closed his laptop, decisively. I still think your top-line projections are overly optimistic, but the methodology is sound. I'll recommend proceeding with the home goods implementation as a pilot. Coming from Lieberman, this was practically a ringing endorsement. As he rose to leave, he paused, studying me with renewed assessment. Catherine has taken a significant gamble on you and your technology, Ms. Parker. I hope, for all our sakes, that it pays off. After he departed, I sat back in my chair, mentally exhausted, but cautiously optimistic. The meeting had gone better than anticipated, not because Lieberman had been easily convinced, but precisely because he hadn't. His rigorous skepticism had pushed me to articulate our value proposition with greater precision and to consider implementation challenges I might otherwise have glossed over. My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. Heard your meeting with Thomas went well. Nicely done. Lunch in my office at 1? I stared at the message, wondering how she already knew, about a meeting that had concluded less than 10 minutes ago. Eleanor's words came back to me. Executive assistants know everything. Apparently, so did CEOs. The remainder of my first week at Simmons Global followed a similar pattern. Intense scrutiny from some executives, cautious alliance building with others, and the delicate process of merging the streamlined team into the larger corporate structure. By Friday afternoon, I was mentally drained but increasingly confident that we could successfully navigate the integration. As I prepared to leave for the weekend, Catherine stopped by my office. Plans tonight? Drinks with my brothers, actually. The words felt strange in my mouth, a normal social engagement with family members who had been peripheral figures in my life for years. Catherine nodded approvingly. Good. Maintain those connections. This job will consume as much of your life as you allow it to. She leaned against my doorframe. I made that mistake early in my career. Let work become my entire identity. Don't repeat it. Noted, I said, surprised by the personal advice. Though I'm not sure my family relationships are the healthiest connections to nurture right now. Family is complicated, she acknowledged. But at least it's real? Corporate relationships? She gestured vaguely at the offices surrounding us. Most of these people would throw you under the bus tomorrow if it advanced their careers. Not all of them, she added quickly. David is good people. Andrea too, once she trusts you. But never confuse professional allies with genuine connections. I nodded, taking her words to heart. Any plans for your weekend? A smile softened her features. My granddaughter's 5th birthday party, princess-themed apparently. I'll be wearing a tiara for much of Saturday. The image of Catherine Wells, billionaire CEO, corporate legend, feared negotiator, in a child's tiara was so unexpected that I laughed out loud. She grinned, clearly enjoying my reaction. Precisely why I keep that part of my life private. Hard to maintain an intimidating reputation when there are photos of you with unicorn face paint circulating. She straightened, resuming her more typical professional demeanor. Have a good weekend, Jessica. You've made an impressive start here. I met my brothers at a rooftop bar downtown, arriving 15 minutes late due to an unexpected call with the implementation team. Mark was already there, nursing what looked like scotch, while Tyler was chatting animatedly with the bartender. The executive arrives, Tyler called as I approached, his smile genuine if slightly amplified by whatever he was drinking. Should we bow or curtsy? I rolled my eyes but couldn't help smiling. This was Tyler's way, teasing but rarely malicious. Very funny. Sorry I'm late. Work call ran long. Mark slid a glass of wine toward me, a Cabernet, my preferred red. The fact that he remembered this small detail touched me unexpectedly. No apology necessary. We've been entertaining ourselves with stories of Dad's sudden expertise in the tech industry. I took a sip of wine, grateful for its warmth after the long week. Oh? He cornered one of my senior partners at lunch yesterday, Mark explained. His expression a mix of amusement and embarrassment. Spent 20 minutes explaining how he'd encouraged your entrepreneurial spirit from an early age. Apparently, he bought you your first computer and suggested you study coding. I nearly choked on my wine. He tried to return the computer Grandma gave me because it was distracting me from more valuable pursuits. And he called coding a hobby for people who can't handle real intellectual challenges. Tyler laughed. Yeah, well, that's not the story he's telling now. According to Dad, he always knew you were destined for tech greatness. He's practically taking credit for founding your company. I should have been angry, but instead found myself oddly detached from my father's revisionist history. Let him tell whatever story makes him feel better. I know the truth. Mark studied me over the rim of his glass. You seem different, more centered somehow. Success will do that, Tyler suggested. I shook my head. It's not the success, it's the clarity. I paused, trying to articulate the transformation that had begun at that birthday dinner. For most of my life, I measured my worth by Dad's approval, or lack thereof. Even when I was actively rebelling against his expectations, I was still using his metrics as my reference point. Now, I shrugged. I've found my own measuring stick. My brothers exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. We should have stood up for you more, Mark said finally. All those years, we just accepted the dynamic as normal. Because for you, it was, I pointed out, not unkindly. Dad's approval was freely given to both of you. You didn't have to fight for it or question why it was withheld. Still, Tyler insisted, suddenly serious in a way he rarely allowed himself to be. We knew it wasn't right, how he treated you. We just didn't know how to challenge it without. He trailed off. Without risking your own standing, I finished for him. I understand, Tyler. Really. We were all navigating Dad's expectations in our own ways. Mark signaled for another round of drinks. He wants to have dinner with you. He's mentioned it approximately 57 times this week. I know. He's texted me daily. I traced the condensation on my glass. I'm not ready for that yet. Take your time, Mark advised. He's not going anywhere, and frankly, a little humility wouldn't kill him. We spent the next few hours catching up, really talking for perhaps the first time in years. Mark shared his frustrations with the partnership track at the firm, his concerns about billable hours consuming his life. Tyler admitted he was considering leaving sales to pursue a long-abandoned interest in architectural design. They asked thoughtful questions about my work, not in the polite, disinterested way of previous family gatherings, but with genuine curiosity. As the evening wound down, Tyler hugged me tightly. "I'm proud of you, Jess. Not because of the acquisition or the fancy title, but because you built something real, something that matters," he grinned. "Also, it's pretty awesome seeing Dad have to eat crow." Mark's goodbye was more reserved, but no less sincere. "Let's not be strangers, okay? Whatever happens with Dad, you've still got us." I walked to my car feeling lighter than I had in years. The relationships with my brothers weren't magically healed. Too much water under that bridge for instant repair. But we had taken the first steps towards something more authentic than what we'd had before. As I drove home, I found myself thinking about Catherine's words. Family is complicated, but at least it's real. Perhaps that was the key. Not expecting perfection or complete understanding, but valuing the real connections, however flawed, over the illusory ones. My phone buzzed with yet another text from my father. "Jessica, please respond. Important to discuss implications of your new position for family financial planning." I smiled wryly, setting the phone aside without responding. Some things hadn't changed. He was still approaching our relationship transactionally, focused on what my success could mean for him rather than what the journey had been for me. But other things had changed, irrevocably. Most importantly, the voice inside my head, the one that had always measured my worth against his approval, had finally gone quiet, replaced by something steadier and more authentic. My own voice, at last. 3 months into my role at Simmons Global, the initial skepticism had largely given way to cautious acceptance. Our pilot implementation in the home goods division had delivered results that exceeded even my optimistic projections. Inventory costs down 36%, stockouts reduced by 42%, and customer satisfaction metrics climbing steadily as product availability improved. Thomas Lieberman himself had presented these figures at the last board meeting. His initial resistance transformed into measured advocacy. My Wednesday lunches with my mother had become a regular fixture. In my calendar, the one appointment Eleanor knew never to reschedule unless absolutely necessary. We'd established a pattern of meeting at a small French bistro halfway between Simmons' headquarters and her volunteer position at the Art Institute, where she'd recently started working in the education department, something my father had dismissed as a hobby, but which clearly brought her genuine joy. Today, as we settled at our usual corner table, I noticed something different about her. A lightness, a spark that had been missing in recent years. "You look happy," I observed as we studied our menus, though we both knew we'd order the same. Things we always did. Niçoise salad for her, croque monsieur for me. She smiled, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. "I suppose I am. The museum is planning a new educational initiative for underserved schools, and they've asked me to help develop the curriculum." Her eyes lit up as she described the program, her hands gesturing animatedly in a way I couldn't remember seeing since I was a child. When she finished, she seemed almost embarrassed by her enthusiasm. "Listen to me. Going on about art lessons for children when you're running a major corporate division. Mom," I said gently, "what you're doing matters. Probably more than what I'm doing, honestly. You're opening up new worlds for kids who might not otherwise have access to them." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "When did you get so wise?" "I had a good teacher," I replied with a smile. Someone who always told me to follow my passion, even when it wasn't the approved path. We fell into comfortable conversation, steering clear of the subject of my father by unspoken agreement. These lunches had become a sanctuary of sorts, a space where we could rebuild our relationship without the distorting influence of family dynamics that had shaped our interactions for decades. As our food arrived, however, my mother's expression grew more serious. "Jessica, there's something I need to tell you. Your father is planning to attend the Chicago Business Leadership Awards next week. He knows you'll be there receiving the Innovation Impact honor." I set down my fork, appetite suddenly diminished. The award, recognizing the economic impact of the streamlined acquisition on Chicago's tech ecosystem, had been announced the previous week. Catherine had insisted I accept it despite my discomfort with public recognition, arguing that visibility for women in tech leadership positions was too important to decline. "You don't have to speak to him," my mother added quickly. "I just didn't want you to be surprised." "Has he mentioned this to you directly?" I asked, wondering if this was another of my father's unilateral decisions. She nodded. "He says he wants to support you publicly, to show family unity." The irony was almost laughable. The man who had disowned me at my birthday dinner, now wanting to present a united family front when it suited his purposes. In the months since that night, he had transitioned from daily texts to weekly emails, each more elaborately casual than the last, as if our relationship were merely experiencing a minor communication lapse rather than a fundamental rupture. "And how do you feel about that?" I asked my mother. She hesitated, clearly torn. "I want peace in our family, Jessica, but not at the expense of your well-being. Not anymore." She squared her shoulders slightly, a small gesture but significant. For a woman who had spent decades accommodating others' needs before her own, "I told your father that his attendance should be contingent on your comfort, not his desire to be seen at a prestigious event." Pride swelled in my chest at this quiet assertion of boundaries. "Thank you for that," I said softly. "It means more than you know." "I should have done it years ago," she replied, regret shadowing her features. "All those times he dismissed your achievements, redirected conversations away from your accomplishments. I let it happen because it was easier than challenging him. I'm sorry, Jessica." "You don't need to apologize," I assured her. "We were all operating within the dynamic he established. Even I accepted it as normal for too long." She shook her head. "A mother should protect her child, not enable behavior that diminishes her." She took a sip of water, composing herself. "Anyway, I wanted you to be prepared. I'll support whatever decision you make about interacting with him at the event." I considered my options. Requesting that my father not attend seemed petty and would create additional strain for my mother. Ignoring him completely at a public event risked creating a scene that would detract from the recognition of my team's accomplishments. The most pragmatic approach would be to establish clear boundaries beforehand. "I'll handle it," I told her, reaching a decision. "But I would appreciate if you could join me at the awards. Actually, would you be my official guest? The invitation includes a +1. Her expression brightened. "Really? You wouldn't rather bring someone from your team, or one of your brothers?" "Zoe and the team will be there as part of the Simmons contingent, and while things with Mark and Tyler are better, I'd rather have you there. If you want to come, that is." "I'd be honored," she said, her eyes suspiciously bright. "Though I'll need to find something appropriate to wear. My wardrobe isn't exactly filled with gala attire these days." "We can fix that," I replied with a smile. "Shopping this weekend?" As we finished our lunch, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. A book she was reading for her art history refresher course, a documentary series I'd been streaming when I could find rare moments of downtime. I realized, with a sense of quiet revelation, that I was getting to know my mother as a person in her own right, not merely as a supporting character in our family narrative. Back at Simmons Global, I found Catherine waiting in my office, scrolling through her tablet with the focused intensity she brought to every task. "How was lunch with your mother?" she asked without looking up. I had long since stopped being surprised by Catherine's awareness of my schedule. "Good," though she mentioned my father is planning to attend the award ceremony next week. This got her attention. She set down the tablet, studying me with those piercing blue eyes. "And how do you feel about that?" "Conflicted," I admitted. "Part of me wants to ban him from attending. Another part recognizes that would create more drama than it's worth." "Politics," Catherine mused. Family or corporate, it's all about managing complex relationships and competing interests. She leaned back in her chair. Though in corporate politics, we rarely have the emotional entanglements that make family dynamics so challenging. I'll handle it, I assured her, echoing what I'd told my mother. I just need to establish clear boundaries. Boundaries are essential, she agreed. Though in my experience, people like your father… She stopped herself. I'm sorry. I shouldn't presume to understand your family situation based on one dinner interaction. No, please, I encouraged her. I value your perspective. She considered for a moment. People who are accustomed to controlling narratives and defining relationships on their terms rarely respect boundaries unless there are consequences for violating them. Your father strikes me as someone who has always determined the rules of engagement in your family. Shifting that dynamic requires more than just stating your boundaries. It requires demonstrating that crossing them has costs. It was insightful advice, reflecting Catherine's decades of navigating power dynamics in corporate America. Thank you. I'll keep that in mind. Now, she said, transitioning back to business mode, about the Collins acquisition proposal. We spent the next hour discussing Simmons Global's potential acquisition of a smaller competitor with complementary technology. Catherine valued my input on these strategic decisions far more than I had initially expected, often incorporating my suggestions into final plans in ways that validated her decision to bring me into the executive team. That evening, as I left the office considerably later than intended, my phone buzzed with an email notification from my father. The subject line read simply, Awards Ceremony. I hesitated before opening it, steeling myself for another attempt at glossing over our fractured relationship. The email was characteristically direct. Jessica, I understand you'll be receiving the Innovation Impact Award next Thursday. I plan to attend to support you and represent our family. I've reserved a table for the occasion. Your mother, Mark, and Tyler will be joining me, along with several clients who expressed interest when I mentioned your recognition. We should coordinate our arrival to ensure a unified family presence. I suggest meeting at the house at 6 p.m. to travel to the venue together. Dad? I stared at the message, equal parts amazed and infuriated by its presumptiveness. Not only had he assumed his attendance was welcome, he had commandeered the entire event, arranging for family members to attend without consulting me, inviting business associates to witness his reflected glory, and attempting to stage manage our arrival as a tableau of family unity. Catherine's words echoed in my mind. People who are accustomed to controlling narratives rarely respect boundaries unless there are consequences for violating them. I drafted my response carefully. Dad, thank you for your interest in the awards ceremony. To clarify a few points. 1. Mom will be attending as my invited guest. We've already made arrangements. 2. While I appreciate your desire to attend, I need to be clear about my expectations. This event recognizes the work of my team and the impact of technology I developed. If you attend, it should be to genuinely celebrate that achievement, not to create networking opportunities or a narrative of family support that hasn't historically existed. 3. I will not be meeting at the house or arriving with family members. As an honoree, I have specific arrival times and pre-event obligations. If you can respect these parameters, I welcome your attendance. If not, I suggest we find another opportunity for family interaction that doesn't coincide with my professional recognition. Jessica, I read it twice, ensuring the tone was firm but not hostile, then pressed send before I could second-guess myself. Setting the phone aside, I poured a glass of wine and settled onto my apartment balcony, watching the city lights glimmer against the darkening sky. My new apartment, a spacious 2-bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of Lake Michigan, was another tangible marker of how my life had changed in recent months. I had purchased it outright, no mortgage necessary. a fact that still occasionally struck me as surreal when I allowed myself to dwell on it. The financial security the acquisition had provided was liberating in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. It wasn't about luxury purchases or status symbols, but the profound freedom of choice, the ability to make decisions based on what I truly wanted, rather than what I could afford or what others expected. My phone buzzed again, a response from my father, arriving more quickly than I had expected. "Jessica, I'm disappointed by your email. Family should present a united front at public events. Your mother hasn't mentioned any plan to attend as your guest, which suggests a lack of communication. As for your other points, I find them unnecessarily combative. My only intention is to support your achievement and share it with people who matter to our family. I hope you'll reconsider your position. Divided family appearances send the wrong message in professional circles." Dad. The response was so predictably dismissive of my boundaries that I almost laughed. He had ignored the substance of my concerns, questioned my communication with my mother, despite her explicit statement at lunch that she had discussed this with him, and reframed my reasonable parameters as combative. This time, my reply was briefer. "Dad, I spoke with Mom at lunch today. She's aware of and has accepted my invitation. My parameters aren't negotiable. You're welcome to attend under these conditions. If that doesn't work for you, I understand." Jessica. I set the phone to Do Not Disturb and returned to my wine and the city view, refusing to allow the interaction to consume my evening. 6 months ago, this exchange would have left me anxious and second-guessing myself. Now, I felt a calm certainty about the boundaries I had established. The night of the awards ceremony arrived clear and unseasonably warm for early autumn in Chicago. My mother and I had selected her outfit the previous weekend, a midnight blue gown that complemented her silver hair and brought out the blue of her eyes that I had inherited. She looked elegant and, more importantly, confident as we entered the venue together. "Nervous?" she asked as we approached the registration table. I considered the question honestly. Not about the award, a little about seeing Dad. "He'll be on his best behavior," she assured me. "He knows this is your night." We were directed to a VIP reception area where Catherine was already holding court, resplendent in a tailored black suit with subtle crystal embellishments that caught the light when she moved. She beckoned us over immediately. "Jessica, and you must be Mrs. Parker. I'm delighted you could join us tonight." Catherine extended her hand to my mother with genuine warmth. "Please, call me Sarah," my mother replied, visibly relaxed by Catherine's friendly approach. "And thank you for recognizing Jessica's work. It means a great deal to see her contributions acknowledged." "Your daughter is transforming how Simmons Global operates," Catherine said. "The recognition is entirely deserved." As they chatted, easily about the museum where my mother volunteered, Catherine, it turned out, was a significant donor to several arts education initiatives. I spotted Zoe and the rest of my team entering the reception area. They had dressed for the occasion with endearing awkwardness, unused to formal attire after years of startup casual. I excused myself to greet them, making quick introductions all around before the announcement that we should proceed to the main ballroom for dinner. Catherine had arranged for my mother to be seated at the Simmons Global table, a thoughtful gesture that ensured she would be comfortable during the proceedings. As we entered the ballroom, I immediately spotted my father, at a table near the front. He had indeed brought Mark and Tyler, along with several people I recognized as clients and partners from his firm. He caught my eye and nodded, his expression neutral. I returned the acknowledgement with a brief smile before continuing to my assigned table. The evening progressed smoothly. Excellent food, pleasant conversation with the Simmons executives and their guests, and mercifully brief speeches from the event organizers. When it came time for the Innovation Impact Award, Catherine herself took the stage to present it, a departure from the program that indicated her personal investment in highlighting my accomplishment. Technological innovation is often measured In practical terms, efficiency gained, costs reduced, processes streamlined, she began. These metrics matter, of course. But true innovation, transformative innovation, does something more profound. It changes how we think about possibility. She went on to describe the predictive inventory system in accessible terms, emphasizing its impact not just on Simmons Global's bottom line, but on the broader Chicago business ecosystem through job creation, sustainability improvements, and establishing the city as a hub for practical AI applications. It's my honor to present the Innovation Impact Award to Jessica Parker, whose vision and persistence have created technology that doesn't just improve systems, it reimagines them entirely. As I made my way to the stage amid enthusiastic applause, I caught a glimpse of my father's expression, a complex mixture of pride, discomfort, and something that looked almost like regret. My mother was beaming, tears in her eyes. Mark and Tyler were applauding vigorously, Tyler adding an enthusiastic whistle that earned him a disapproving glance from our father. I accepted the Crystal Award from Catherine with a quick embrace, then turned to the microphone, suddenly aware of all the eyes fixed on me. Public speaking had never been my strongest skill. I was more comfortable with code than crowds. But tonight, I felt a surprising sense of ease. Thank you, Catherine, for that generous introduction, and thank you to the Chicago Business Leadership Council for this recognition. I paused, gathering my thoughts. Innovation doesn't happen in isolation. It requires an ecosystem of support, challenge, and opportunity. I'm fortunate to work with a team of brilliant problem solvers who transform ideas into reality every day. I acknowledge Zoe and the other former Streamline employees by name, thanking them for their dedication during the lean startup years. I thanked Catherine and the Simmons Global Executive Team for their vision in recognizing the potential of our technology. Then, departing from my prepared remarks, I added, I'd also like to thank my mother, Sarah, whose unwavering belief in my potential gave me the courage to pursue unconventional paths. Mom, your support has meant more than you know. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, tears now flowing freely. From the corner of my eye, I saw my father shift in his seat, perhaps recognizing the deliberate omission of his name from my acknowledgments. I concluded with a brief reflection on the future of technology as an enabler of human potential, rather than a replacement for human judgment, a philosophy that had guided Streamline's development from the beginning, and returned to my seat. Amid another round of applause, the remainder of the ceremony passed in a blur of other awards and speeches. As the formal program concluded, and the networking portion of the evening began, I steeled myself for the inevitable interaction with my father. I didn't have to wait long. Jessica, he said, approaching our table with careful politeness. Congratulations. That was quite an honor. Thank you, I replied, keeping my tone professional but not cold. I appreciate you coming. An awkward silence stretched between us, filled with all the words neither of us knew how to say. Finally, he cleared his throat. Your speech was excellent, very poised. Thank you, I said again, wondering if we were doomed to this stilted exchange of pleasantries. Your mother looks lovely tonight, he observed, glancing to where she stood chatting animatedly with Catherine and David Winters. That color suits her. Yes, she does. We picked out the dress together last weekend. He nodded, seeming genuinely pleased by this evidence of my strengthened relationship with my mother. That's good, Jessica. She's missed you. The simple acknowledgement of my mother's feelings, without centering his own experience, was so uncharacteristic that I found myself momentarily speechless. Before I could formulate a response, Mark and Tyler appeared at our father's side. Killer speech, sis, Tyler said, giving me a quick hug. Way to make the rest of us look like underachievers. Mark's congratulations were more restrained, but equally sincere. Truly impressive, Jessica. I actually understood what your technology does now, which is saying something. As we fell into easier conversation, my father remained oddly quiet, watching our interactions with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. When Catherine approached to whisper that a reporter from the Chicago Tribune wanted a quick statement from me, I excused myself, squeezing my mother's hand reassuringly as I passed. The interview took longer than expected, and by the time I returned to the main ballroom, I discovered my father standing alone by one of the large windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. Something, curiosity perhaps, or a sense that this moment offered an opportunity, prompted me to join him rather than returning to the Simmons table. "Beautiful view," I said, coming to stand beside him. He turned, seeming surprised by my approach. "Yes, it is. Chicago at night. There's nothing quite like it." We stood in silence for a moment, watching the city lights shimmer against the darkness. "Jessica," he said finally, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "I owe you an apology." The words were so unexpected that I wondered if I had misheard him. In all my years, I could count on one hand the times I had heard my father apologize for anything. "At your birthday dinner?" he continued when I didn't immediately respond. What I said was, "Inexcusable. Regardless of our disagreements, you are my daughter. You will always be family." I studied him, trying to gauge the sincerity behind this uncharacteristic display of contrition. "What's changed, Dad? Is it the award? The acquisition? The fact that my success is now public and validated by people you respect?" He flinched slightly at the directness of my questions. "Those things made me see more clearly, yes," he admitted. "But not in the way you might think. They forced me to confront my own limitations, my narrow definition of success." He paused, seeming to struggle with what came next. "And my failure to recognize that your path, while different from what I envisioned, was never lesser, just different." It was perhaps the most honest thing he had ever said to me. Not a complete reckoning with years of dismissal and favoritism, but a start, an acknowledgement that his perspective had been flawed. "I appreciate that," I said carefully, "but rebuilding trust takes time. It can't happen in one conversation at an awards ceremony." "I understand," he nodded. "I'm not asking for immediate forgiveness, just an opening, a chance to get to know the person you've become on your terms." I considered his request, weighing it against the history of our relationship and my own emotional well-being. "I can agree to that," I said finally. "Small steps. Maybe dinner sometime next month, just the two of us." Relief washed over his features. "I'd like that." As we rejoined the gathering, my mother caught my eye from across the room, her questioning glance asking what had transpired between us. I gave her a small, reassuring smile. There would be time later to explain the tentative truce we had established. The rest of the evening passed pleasantly, with Catherine introducing me to various business and civic leaders who expressed interest in how our technology might apply to their organizations. By the time we prepared to leave, I felt a profound sense of closure, not just for the recognition of my professional achievements, but for the beginning of a new chapter in my relationship with my father. Outside, as we waited for our respective cars, my mother leaned close. "Everything okay with your father?" "Getting there," I replied honestly. "We're going to try dinner next month. Just the two of us." She squeezed my hand. "One step at a time." Exactly. I looked around at the disparate elements of my life now converging. My mother beside me, Catherine speaking with David a few yards away, Zoe and the team laughing. As they waited for their rideshare, my father and brothers standing near the valet station. Different pieces of who I was, no longer compartmentalized but coexisting in the same space. When my car arrived, I hugged my mother goodnight, promising to call her the next day. As I slid into the back seat and gave the driver my address, I caught a final glimpse of the assembled group. Family, colleagues, friends. illuminated by the warm glow of the venue's exterior lights. 6 months ago, I could never have imagined this scenario. Not just the professional recognition, but the recalibrated relationships, the newfound confidence, the sense of standing fully in my own authority rather than seeking validation from external sources. The journey from that birthday dinner, from my father's shouted rejection to tonight's tentative reconciliation, had transformed me in ways that extended far beyond career advancement or financial success. I had discovered something more valuable than approval, the certainty of my own worth, independent of others' assessment. As the car pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back. The past, with all its painful dynamics and missed connections, would always be part of my story. But it no longer defined me or limited what might come next. The future stretched before me, open with possibility. And for the first time in my life, I was moving toward it entirely on my own terms. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.